Thank you so much for staying with us here on First Look on this beautiful Monday morning. It's time for our very first interview of the day. We're commemorating Chemical Awareness Week this week from the 16th right down. This is, of course, an initiative of the Pesticides and Toxic Chemicals Control Board. I hope I got that right. Sitting with me, two guests in studio. First, to my immediate left, we've got Dr. Nneka James. She is a veterinary officer, and she's also a member of the board of the Toxic Chemicals Board. Is that right?
Yes.
Okay, got that right. Welcome to the studio. Welcome back.
Good morning, and thank you for having me.
Very welcome. Last time we saw you, you were leading a pledge or a creed of some sort at a recent graduation. Is that right?
Yes.
Okay. All right. We've also got in studio Mr. Jonah Ormond. He's a registrar of pesticides and toxic chemicals. Good morning, sir.
Good morning.
All right. First time interviewing you, I think. Welcome to the set.
Yes, it is.
All right. Let's start with a look at the week, an overview of the week, first of all, its importance, before we get into other discussions. Dr. James.
Well, so this week is Chemicals Week, but you know, we have an intersection here because as we're starting Chemicals Week, we also want to wish everyone a happy World Food Day today, because today is World Food Day, and there is an important link, of course, between the use of toxic chemicals and World Food Day. Of course, this year, the theme for World Food Day is Water is Life, Leave No One Behind. And when we think about our use of chemicals in agriculture, we have to think about how we're actually utilizing them, how they're being utilized both with crops, and even when we think of chemicals, this also includes the antibiotics that we may be required to use sometimes when caring for our livestock, and even the pesticides as well that we utilize. So all of these really interplay. So as we start Chemicals Week, we also want to encourage our farmers, our agrochemicals users, all our persons who are involved in agriculture to ensure they're utilizing their chemicals safely. Because for World Food Day and the production of food, our livestock become our food, our crops are our food, and we want to ensure that we are always being very judicious with the use of chemicals to ensure that what goes from the farm to the fork of our residents across Antigua and Barbuda is indeed a healthy and safe food product. So I have to start with that before I get into the Chemicals Week. And of course, the Chemicals Awareness Week, we really just want to ensure that persons understand that chemicals are not just, you know, the substances that you might think you find in a laboratory, but they're all around us. They're in the pesticides we use throughout our homes, and we spray out our homes with BOP in the night from mosquitoes. They are also in what we utilize to clean our homes, the bleaches and other substances. And they are, of course, they sometimes form part of what creates our food product when we think of the safe use of our chemicals in agriculture. So this week we want to ensure that persons understand how chemicals can be utilized safely, and we are going to be having a number of different events. Of course, we're kickstarting the week here on ABS, where, as usual, as we should, to ensure the nation is well informed of what we're doing, what our plans are, and of course, the significance of this week. And when we say awareness, we're not only having this week to make persons aware, but the aim is to empower our citizens across Antigua and Barbuda to, as I said, utilize chemicals in a safe manner. So we're having our media interviews today. That continues also tomorrow across our radio stations. Then on Wednesday, we are going to be having a stakeholders discussion, and that is going to be very interesting. For that, we are going to be having this discussion at Antigua and Barbuda Hospitality Training Institute, and a number of our stakeholders across agriculture, health, and other related industries have been invited to ensure that everyone is part of that discussion, because we cannot have a Chemicals Awareness Week with an aim to empower persons, and we're only including persons from the chemicals, what we might consider to be the most general chemical sector or just agriculture, but we want to ensure that all parties are involved so that we can all share that same message in ensuring that we are empowering persons to utilize chemicals in a safe and judicious manner. Then on Thursday, one of my favorite parts of the week, we're going to be going into the schools.
Okay.
We're going to be having discussions with students at Jennings Secondary School and Antigua Girls High School, because, of course, they have chemistry students there, they have integrated science students there, and we want to ensure that they too understand how to utilize chemicals. And Jennings in particular will also be speaking to the agriculture students, because once again, we want to make sure they're utilizing the chemicals in a safe manner, so that when the product gets to our residents across Antigua, to their own homes, their families, that is indeed something safe for us all to utilize. And then we will be closing out the week on Friday with a roundup of what would have taken place on our media houses again.
So you should be back on Friday then?
You will be back on Friday.
Looking forward to it. Perhaps Mr. Ormond can come in here. When we talk about chemicals and its interplay with agriculture, what exactly are we referring to? Is it pesticides? What can we say is an issue? I know in some other territories they may have issues with chemicals affecting waterways, that's from plants, etc. Perhaps we're not as industrialized in Antigua. But when we talk about chemicals and the effect on agriculture, what are we really referring to?
Well, thank you for that question. And before I dive into your question, just to give a little context on what the board does.
Yes.
And the board is responsible for chemicals in its entire life cycle, from manufacture, storage, transportation, disposal, sales, everything that has to do with chemicals. And when we say chemicals, we don't only talk about agricultural pesticides or agro-pesticides. We refer to agro-pesticides, household pesticides, vector control pesticides, industrial pesticides, precursor chemicals. All these chemicals fall under the purview and the mandate of the board. So a lot of times, like you asked in your question, a lot of people start off with agrochemicals, maybe because it relates directly to food. But the fact of the matter is that less than 30% of all the chemicals that are imported into Antigua and Barbuda are for agricultural purposes. The rest are either in household products or in industry, whether it be in the hotels or in some sort of manufacturing or some other cleaning related activity. In Antigua and Barbuda, we do have to be conscious of the fact that we have very low water table. Runoff is an issue that we have. We are constantly urging farmers and chemical users within the agricultural sector to ensure that, number one, first, you know what you have to treat, so that you ensure that you get the right chemicals for treating the right pests that you have affecting your crops, and two, that you read the Bible. We call it the label the Bible. The label should provide all the guidance that you require to use that chemical in the safest way possible. Again, no chemical is safe, but there is safe use of chemical. And when this chemical goes through the registration process before it is approved for use in Antigua and Barbuda, the board ensures that the label has all that information that would be required to make a user informed of what is the best way to use this chemical.
And what's that registration process like? We know we've heard of the FDA in the United States and the rigorous procedures that they go through there. Before something gets commissioned for use here, just briefly describe what that process is like.
Well, our similar is based on the recommendations of the WHO and the World Health Organization, FAO. They have guidance that they give to countries on how we should go about evaluating a chemical for registration. So we require certain information from the registrant that would include the toxicological information on the chemical, the mode of use. We need to know whether or not that chemical has been registered in the country of origin, whether it is sold in the country of origin, because sometimes chemicals are registered somewhere, but that country might not think that chemical is safe enough to be used in that country. And if that's the case, then we should take a closer look at it. Once it comes here, we need to look at the label to see whether all the information that is required is on the label, the safety instructions, the precautionary instructions, disposal instructions, storage instructions. We also look at the packaging sizes in which they are imported. If most of the farms in Antigua are small holders, when you look in the grand scheme of things, there is no need for a farmer to bring down a 5-gallon or 55-gallon drum of certain chemicals. Chemicals also have expiry dates, so we have to be conscious of the quantities of the packaging sizes to ensure that whatever comes in is used within that period so that we don't create problems later down the road where we have absolute chemicals either being stored or disposed of indiscriminately.
I'm going to come back to you to ask about mercury, because we've done a lot of work with mercury. But Dr. Hull James, let me come back to you in terms of asking this question about agriculture and our farmers. As Mr. Ormond was talking about the safe use of the chemicals,
Yes.
what work have we done with farmers, whether crops or livestock, in terms of ensuring that they are using chemicals safely, or basically promoting the safe use?
Yes, so that is of course a critical part of what we do in the Ministry of Agriculture. We host a number of training sessions and so on with our farmers, where we discuss how to utilize the chemicals safely. Our extension officers, particularly those in the extension division dealing with crops, they are constantly out in the field having these one-on-one discussions as well with our farmers. But it's something very important, because and from the livestock aspect, when we think about chemicals, we're generally discussing antibiotics and also pesticides. And the important thing to consider with chemicals in these animals in particular is the withdrawal times. And that is something that I constantly preach with my farmers, and we always have discussions about when utilizing after antibiotics, once prescribed by your veterinarian on farm, you must adhere to the withdrawal time. And this simply refers to the period of time within which you must not slaughter that animal for use, because of course it takes time for the residues from those antibiotics to then be metabolized and to be completely removed from the animal's system, from the tissues and so on, so that it can then be consumed safely. So, because there are times when animals, may become sick and antibiotics are required. It's just to ensure that they are prescribed by your veterinarian, you're utilizing them in that safe manner, and that once, you have completed that course, because you also want to ensure you're completing the entire course and not causing another problem, which could be the issue of antibiotic resistance by not completing that course of antibiotics. Once they're used completely and safely, you adhere to that withdrawal time, so that it's usually a 2 to 3 week withdrawal period, depending on the specific antibiotic or the specific chemical. If maybe now we're talking about things like your porons, like beta-col, and so on, when we're talking about use to remove ticks and that type of thing, you want to ensure that you are adhering to that withdrawal time. I can't stress that particular point enough. And it's also important when we think about agricultural runoff, as Mr. Ormond said, we have a pretty low water table in Antigua, and the reality also is that whatever we utilize in our animals, in our crops, these are going to be passed through the digestive system, end up as feces in the soil. When it rains, when we have flooding, even when we have, regular rainfall, this gets into our waterways, and then, everything is all connected, everything is interconnected. There's a cycle, and so we have to be very mindful of that. And that is why we want to reduce the use of chemicals where possible, and when they do have to be utilized, ensure that you're utilizing them in a safe manner. Ensure that you've had these discussions with your veterinarian to ensure that you're utilizing the correct chemical, the correct antibiotic for whatever that particular issue is.
As you were speaking, I just realized that's why predial larceny is such a problem as well, because
Yes.
when you steal an animal, you have no idea if that animal is being treated, and then you end up selling this animal and infecting a lot of people.
Exactly, and that is a very critical point that you just made. And many persons don't understand. They just, maybe see a farmer, see the animals, and think, wow, how can I make a quick buck? They're not thinking about how this completely affects the livelihood of that farmer. They're not thinking about the repercussions that it has on the broader society of Antigua and Barbuda, when that animal now gets into the food chain and may not actually be safe as yet for the food chain. So that's why we also encourage our consumers to know where you're purchasing from, know where you're purchasing your meat from and whatnot. And, we are actually looking in the Veterinary and Livestock Division to really set up a traceability system. This is a project that we're currently working on with the Food and Agricultural Organization, where we'll be piloting a traceability system very soon. Hopefully, we'll be able to put that into larger use across all the farms in Antigua. That is something that we are working on as we speak.
And is that a result of the consultations you've had? I know Mr. K was running some of these consultative processes. Is that coming out of that?
Well, we've had consultative processes in that manner, but then we've also been having discussions regularly with FAO, or the Food and Agricultural Organization, and they have been really working with us for us to get the tools and equipment required to actually get this particular project off the ground. Because I'm sure you've heard us discuss before, registration of farmers and that type of thing, and all of that will then feed into this traceability system that we are embarking on.
Excellent. Mr. Ormond, I promise to come back to you in terms of mercury. Anything else you wanted to add to what Dr. Hull James would have said? We've heard a lot about it in the news, about mercury, dealing with mercury, disposing of mercury safely. I also want to ask you about sargassum, if you have any thoughts on that, any more work being done by the board. Start with the mercury for us.
Okay, so in terms of mercury, yes, there is some discussions. There's actually some regulations or legislation being looked at. We are working on the issues of mercury as it relates to mercury in products. We are aware of the dangers of mercury. We have recognized that there are a number of cosmetic products in Antigua which are being utilized more or less like a trending thing right now. But
I mean bleaching creams.
Yes,
yes.
To put it bluntly, bleaching creams.
Very familiar. Go ahead.
Yes, and maybe in some instances that the individuals who use these creams are not conscious of the dangers or the potential dangers that they are putting themselves at. So the board is looking at regulations that would ensure that whatever creams or cosmetic products that come in would be within the safe level. To safeguard the health of the population. We also have to be conscious that the effects of the mercury in these creams are not limited only to the users. When you put on mercury cream on you, it's in your house. You touch your furniture, you touch your utensils and things like that. Then you have children in the area that could also be affected. You have pets. Also, you have the issue of mercury in equipment. You have the thermometers, you have mercury amalgam that is being used for dentists, you have mercury in bulbs and stuff like that. So all of these, there have been programs where we're trying to phase out and change out mercury bulbs. There are programs where the amalgam is being phased out and the thermometers. So we are doing government is doing significant work across various sectors to eliminate mercury from products. We are signed on to the Mercury Convention. The Conference of the Parties should be coming up soon, and we are working assiduously in that regard to eliminate that from our lifestyle.
All right, we have 1 minute, so 30 seconds from each of you in terms of wrap up. Dr. Hull James, let's start with you.
Well, once again, I just want to bring back that link between World Food Day and Chemicals Awareness Week, because drainage, that is the main thing that we think about. Once again, water is life, water is food, water is so essential, and so we must take into consideration how we're utilizing our chemicals, not only in our homes, but for our farmers, for our animal owners. How are we utilizing any antibiotics that we may have to utilize that have been prescribed to us by our veterinarians? How are we utilizing the pesticide products and so on? Because all of this gets back into the food system, especially with our farmers, back into our waterways. So I want to encourage persons to utilize chemicals in that safe and judicious manner, and just be very mindful of these different things when utilizing chemicals.
Excellent. Mr. Ormond?
I think Dr. Hull James did a very good job in wrapping it up. However, I would just like to say that we all can recognize the importance that chemicals play in our everyday life. We use it from the moment that we wake up in the morning till we go to sleep in everything that we do. However, we also have to be conscious of the body burden of these chemicals. That everything that we use adds some sort of burden from a chemical-related perspective. and that we, from the Pesticides Board perspective, has to ensure that whatever comes into the country and is being used, whether it is in food, industry, in the household, is safe for use. And we have to also ensure that the users are informed and aware, and that the pest control operators or the businesses that use these chemicals are licensed and registered to do that activity with registered products. So I would like to also take this opportunity to encourage the listening public, or the viewing public rather, to tune into our various media interviews throughout the week, where we'll be diving in depth in more specialized topics to give more information, and that you could always reach out to the Pesticides Board at pesticidesboard@ab.gov.ag, or you could call us at 462-9191 if you have any queries or you need any information.
Excellent. That's a number we can easily remember. All right. Thank you so much to both of you for joining us this morning. To Jonah Ormond, who's the Registrar of the Pesticide and Toxic Chemicals Board, and Dr. Nneka Hall-James, who is a member of the board of directors. So thank you so much, both of you, for joining us this morning.
Thank you for
All right. That's how we end this very first interview right here on Antigua Barbuda today. It's now time to celebrate, though. Not that I haven't been